Hi class, it's Dr. Linder, and in this video we're going to be looking at the kidney or the urinary system. We'll try and break this up into a few small videos. Um, what I'd like for you to really take home from this lecture is going to be uh, the primary parts of the kidney, the parts of the nephron, the filtration through it, the blood supply through it. So let's take a look at some of the main parts, if we would. I think it's really important to refamiliarize yourself with the aorta. And the reason why it's important, it's not just involved in the cardiovascular system, right? But there is a major branch off the abdominal aorta called the renal artery. Okay. And from the renal artery, there are going to be many branches leading into this microcirculation into the kidneys. And that's a very important concept to grasp. And I will go over with you that microcirculation of the kidney and how it's involved in, the filtration and the uh, absorption or reabsorption and secretion and excretion of toxic wastes from the body. The entrance of many of the blood vessels into the kidney is called the renal hilum. And yes, there was a renal artery. There's also a renal vein. The renal vein will bring the deoxygenated blood into the IVC, the inferior vena cava. Okay, and the IVC goes up and it's trying to bring blood back, the deoxygenated blood back to the right atrium of the heart. Some other landmarks, we have the iliac crest right here. That's part of the ilium. You'll notice that the left kidney, this is the left side and this is the right side. If I were to draw a line from the top of the left kidney and we were to go straight across, you could see that the left kidney is higher than the right kidney. The right kidney is a little bit lower. On top of the kidneys, we can see the adrenal gland, aka suprarenal gland. Uh, Inferior to the kidneys, we can see that we start to have the ureters. And remember, ureters have two E's, not to be confused with urethra that has one E. Because it has one E, you have one urethra. Two E's, you have two ureters. One, two. And look where the ureters are going, right? The ureters are connecting the kidney to the urinary bladder. Okay. This is a female. We can see it's a female because above the urinary bladder is the uterus. Okay. All right, so those are just some of the main superficial uh, parts of the urinary tract when cutting open the abdomen, removing the abdominal musculature, removing the ribs, and the kidneys are behind the peritoneum. So they are referred to as retroperitoneal or retroperitoneum. So we showed you the kidneys and the function of the kidneys, right? It's the main organ that's going to produce urine. What is urine? It's the fluid containing water. It's going to contain ions and small soluble compounds. The urinary tract is made up of the two ureters. These are the two tubes that are going to carry urine from where to where? It's going to go from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. And what is the urinary bladder doing? Good question. The urinary bladder is that muscular sac, and it's going to store urine. Okay. Then from the urinary bladder, there is the urethra. The urethra is the tube that carries urine from where to where? From the urinary bladder to the outside world, to the exterior. The term urination is sometimes used interchangeably with micturition. That is the process of eliminating urine. There is the contraction of muscles in the urinary bladder that forces urine through the urethra and out of the body. And micturition is controlled by the frontal lobe of the brain. The frontal lobe of the brain isn't really developed in babies, which is why babies pee all the time. It's why babies need to wear a diaper. They don't have the control. The frontal lobe of the brain is the inhibitory part of the brain. It's designed to stop things or to slow things down. That's why a baby's heart rate is so fast. That's why a baby's breathing very quickly. That's why a baby can't inhibit or control bowel movements or inhibit and control or stop urination. That's why babies wear diapers and why parents go through so many of them for 3 to 4 years of a baby's life. Um, it also explains why, as people get older, old, let's hope well into their hundreds, before the frontal lobe of the brain starts to break down a little bit. And when that happens, it's the individual has the same sort of symptoms as the baby would because the baby's brain isn't fully developed. Now you have an adult brain that's breaking down, not as developed as it should be. There's incontinence, the inability to hold on to urine, and people as they get older, they often have to wear Depends or an adult diaper. Okay, that helps you understand a little bit of the frontal lobe of the brain. Now, just as a quick overview, just looking at how important the kidneys are and how they're connected to so many other systems. If we look in the center, the kidneys regulate the volume, the composition, and the pH of the body fluids by removing waste and excess substances from the blood and excreting them into urine. And the ureters transport the urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder, which stores the urine until it's eliminated. Okay. Uh, let's look. What is the connection with the integumentary system, with the skin, the hair, the nails, right? The kidneys and the skin both contribute to what? The synthesis of calcitriol, and that's the active form of vitamin D. That's because the UV rays come down, it hits the skin, it hits the subcutaneous cholesterol on the skin, and the subcutaneous cholesterol makes these vitamin D precursors that go to the individual's liver first. That's the first pit stop. It goes through hydroxylation, and then it goes to the kidneys where it hydroxylates it again. And when people get their blood checked, it's usually 25 OH to 25 hydroxide is the blood test. Hydroxide from hydroxylation, 25 hydroxylation. The kidneys help to adjust levels of blood calcium and phosphates needed for the building of extracellular bone matrix. So it's important for the skeletal system. It's important for the muscular system, right? The kidneys help to adjust the level of blood calcium, and we know calcium is needed to help muscles contract. We know calcium is needed for neurological stimulation. The kidneys also perform gluconeogenesis, which means being able to produce glucose from non-sugar forms. That's gluconeogenesis, forming new glucose. So the kidneys perform gluconeogenesis, which provides glucose for the ATP production in neurons, especially when a person's in a fasting state or they're hungry and they haven't eaten in a while. So you're starting to see that it's involved, the kidneys are linked to so many different uh, systems in the body. And it's important to kind of be familiar with some of those. The kidneys are really important for regulating blood volume and blood pressure. We know that by adjusting the volume of water lost in the urine, that helps to regulate blood pressure, right? If you hold on to water, blood pressure goes up, and if you lose water, blood pressure goes down. Think of what happens if someone's retaining a lot of water and their ankles are swollen and they have pitting edema down in their ankles, which is when you take your thumb and you press it into the distal part of the tibia or the fibula and you press in and you hold it for a second. When you remove your thumb, you still see the thumb print and the indentation in the person's ankle. That individual uses a diuretic and they lose the excess water and their blood pressure goes down. Okay. The kidneys are involved in releasing EPO, erythropoietin. We abbreviate it as EPO. And EPO is the hormone that the kidneys release that goes to the bone marrow and pushes out more red blood cells. And it's involved in renin. And if we think about renin, renin is what takes angiotensinogen. It takes angiotensinogen. It takes angiotensinogen, and renin is produced, angiotensinogen, that's produced by the liver. That's produced by the liver. And then renin is produced by the kidneys, and renin comes over here, kind of knocks off the O-gin and produces angiotensin, produces angiotensin 1. Okay, and I do have a nice picture coming up that kind of shows what happens and how angiotensin 1 gets converted to angiotensin 2 and all the beautiful things angiotensin 2 does to increase blood pressure. It's involved in regulating plasma ion concentrations. We're talking about sodium, potassium, and chloride levels by controlling the quantities lost in urine. And the body has the ability of removing these things or reabsorbing these things. And the kidneys and the tubules that are found in the kidneys, they're temperamental. They can choose to lose certain ions, and then they can say, you know what, let's hold on to it. And it can absorb, or I should say, reabsorb these things, or it can secrete and eventually excrete these things. Uh, it can also regulate calcium levels through the synthesis of vitamin D, calcitriol. The kidneys are involved in regulating blood pH by controlling the loss of hydrogens and bicarbonate ions. The more hydrogen we have, the more acidic, and the more bicarbonate we have, the more alkalinic. It's involved in production of vitamin D and EPO, erythropoietin. Vitamin D or calcitriol is a hormone. The kidneys are involved in the excretion of wastes and foreign substances. It is associated with the liver. The liver and the kidneys kind of work hand in hand. The kidneys are involved in what we call phase 1 and phase 2 of liver detoxification. And then the kidneys are involved in what we call phase 3, which is the removal of those toxins and excreting it from the body. It's involved in the regulation of blood glucose. You heard me say before gluconeogenesis, which is producing glucose from non-sugar forms. So you're talking about proteins and fats. So it carries out gluconeogenesis, especially in a prolonged fasting state. This is just what I had mentioned before about vitamin D production. It's really important. So we have UV rays that hit the subcutaneous cholesterol in the skin. It makes a pit stop from the skin. It'll stop off in the liver. and then it makes another pit stop in the kidneys. At the liver, it makes 25 OH, and in the kidneys, it makes 125 OH. The importance of vitamin D, it does help to maintain calcium balance in the body, but every organ in the body, every single organ in the body has vitamin D receptors. And you want to make sure that your 25 OH levels is somewhere around 55, somewhere around 55. Normal range, they typically say, is between 30 and 100. That's quite a big range, isn't it? But we think that 55-ish is a nice optimal, functional number. If 30 to 100 is normal, and someone is 31, do you think that's just as good as 55? It may not be flagged because it falls within the range, but you want that number somewhere in here to be optimally well. When a person is living somewhere in the Northeast, right, for October, November, December, January, February, March, April, and May, they're really not exposed to healthy and good, strong UV rays to even make it. And that's why vitamin D supplementation is so important. But whenever taking vitamin D3, it should be taken in conjunction with vitamin K. And a lot of the nutraceutical companies today, you'll see, have vitamin D3 with vitamin K in the proper ratios. Vitamin D does help us absorb calcium into the vasculature, into the blood vessels, but vitamin K is needed to drive that calcium out of the blood vessels and into the tissues, like especially bone. If an individual can't drive calcium into the bone and the calcium stays in the blood vessels due to vitamin K deficiency, then you get vascular calcification and high blood pressure as a result. That's why vitamin D has a bad rap, not because it causes blood pressure, but many people take a good amount of vitamin D without K. And when you take D by itself, you can absorb calcium in the blood vessels, and if it can't get into the bone, then you get vascular calcification and high blood pressure. Okay, good place to take our first break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the urinary system.